Shadow work is the process of facing the parts of ourselves that we've hidden away, the parts we've deemed too dark, unworthy, or unacceptable to bring out into the open. These parts don't just disappear because we suppress them, they linger in the background, shaping our thoughts, our emotions, and even our choices without us realizing it. The anger we feel toward others, the insecurities that hold us back, the jealousy that creeps in during moments of comparison, these are not random occurrences, they are the voice of the shadow, calling out to be noticed, to be acknowledged. But instead of paying attention, most of us run. We distract ourselves with work, social media, entertainment, or surface-level self-improvement practices, hoping that if we just stay busy enough, these feelings will go away. They don't. They sit there, waiting, growing stronger the longer they are ignored. The more we suppress them, the more they control us, manifesting in self-sabotaging behaviors, toxic relationships, and an inability to truly feel at peace. To face your shadow is to face yourself. It's to confront the parts of you that you were taught to reject, the parts you've labeled as wrong or shameful. Maybe you were told that crying is a sign of weakness, so you learned to bottle up your emotions. Maybe you were taught that anger is destructive, so you silenced your frustrations. Over time, these suppressed emotions don't vanish, they transform into something hidden yet powerful, influencing your life in subtle but significant ways. You might find yourself lashing out at loved ones over small issues, procrastinating on important tasks, or feeling a constant undercurrent of dissatisfaction that you can't explain. These are signs that your shadow is at work, pulling the strings from behind the curtain. Shadow work involves pulling back that curtain. It's about looking at these hidden parts of yourself with honesty and compassion, recognizing that they are not your enemy. They are a part of you, and they have something to teach you, if you're willing to listen.
Click subscribe to this channel to get more topics you love.
But listening to your shadow is not easy. It requires a level of vulnerability and self-awareness that most of us are not used to. We live in a society that values appearances, that encourages us to project an image of perfection to the world while hiding anything that might make us seem flawed. Social media, in particular, has amplified this tendency, turning our lives into curated highlight reels where only the best moments are shared. In this environment, it's no wonder that so many of us feel disconnected from ourselves. We've become so focused on maintaining an external image that we've lost touch with our internal reality. Shadow work is about reconnecting with that reality, peeling back the layers of conditioning and expectations to reveal the truth of who we are. It's not about fixing yourself or becoming perfect, it's about becoming whole. When you begin shadow work, one of the first things you'll notice is how uncomfortable it feels. Our instinct is to avoid discomfort, to push away anything that makes us feel vulnerable, ashamed, or afraid. But discomfort is a sign that you're touching on something important. It's a signal that you're getting closer to the truth. For example, let's say you feel a deep sense of jealousy when a friend achieves something you've always wanted. Instead of shaming yourself for feeling that way, shadow work invites you to ask what's underneath that jealousy. Is it a sense of inadequacy, a fear that you're not good enough? Or maybe it's a reminder of a dream you've given up on, a goal you've suppressed because you didn't think it was possible. Jealousy, like all emotions, is not inherently bad. It's information. It's a message from your shadow pointing to something you've ignored or avoided. By facing it, by sitting with it and asking what it has to say, you begin to integrate it into your conscious self, and in doing so, you take away its power to control you. Integration is the goal of shadow work. It's not about erasing the shadow or getting rid of your negative emotions. It's about bringing those hidden parts of yourself into the light, acknowledging their existence and finding a way to integrate them into your life in a healthy way. For example, if you've suppressed your anger for years, shadow work might involve learning how to express that anger constructively rather than letting it build up into explosive outbursts. If you've buried your insecurities, it might involve acknowledging them and working through them rather than letting them dictate your actions from the background. Integration is about balance. It's about understanding that your shadow is not separate from you, it is you. And when you accept that, when you stop fighting against yourself, you create the space for true inner peace. But let's not romanticize this process. Shadow work is not a quick fix, and it's not something you can do once and be done with. It's a lifelong practice, a commitment to self-awareness and self-acceptance. There will be moments when it feels overwhelming, when you uncover parts of yourself that you're not ready to face. That's okay. Shadow work is not about perfection, it's about progress. It's about taking small steps toward understanding yourself, even when it feels difficult, and over time those small steps add up. You start to notice patterns in your behavior, triggers that used to send you spiraling but now feel manageable. You begin to understand why you react the way you do, why certain situations or people bring out the worst in you. And with that understanding comes choice. When you're no longer controlled by your shadow, you have the freedom to respond to life in a way that aligns with your values and your true self. Think about the last time you felt triggered by someone or something. Maybe it was a comment from a coworker that made you feel small, or an argument with a loved one that left you feeling angry and misunderstood. In that moment, it's easy to blame the other person, to focus on what they did wrong. But shadow work asks you to look inward. What was it about that comment or that argument that triggered you? What wound did it touch? Often, the things that trigger us are tied to unresolved issues within ourselves, issues that we buried in our shadow. By examining these triggers, by tracing them back to their source, we can begin to heal the wounds that gave them power in the first place. This is not about excusing bad behavior or letting others off the hook. It's about taking responsibility for your own healing, for your own growth. Shadow work is not just about healing, it's also about discovering parts of yourself that you've forgotten or rejected. For example, maybe you were told as a child that you were too loud or too much, so you learned to tone yourself down, to make yourself smaller to fit in. Over time, you might have lost touch with your boldness, your creativity, your ability to take up space without apologizing for it. Shadow work is about reclaiming those parts of yourself, recognizing that they were never the problem. The problem was the messages you received, the expectations placed on you by others. When you reclaim these parts of yourself, you begin to see that the shadow is not something to fear. It's a source of strength, of authenticity, of wholeness. This process of reclamation is not linear. There will be setbacks, moments when you fall back into old patterns or feel overwhelmed by the weight of what you're uncovering. But these moments are not failures. They are part of the process. Each time you face your shadow, you grow a little stronger, a little more self-aware. You begin to see that your worth is not defined by your flaws or your mistakes. It's defined by your willingness to face yourself, to accept yourself as you are, and to keep moving forward. Shadow work is the missing piece to real inner peace because it addresses the root causes of our suffering rather than just the symptoms. It teaches us that peace is not about avoiding conflict or suppressing negative emotions. It's about embracing all parts of ourselves, even the messy, uncomfortable ones. It's about realizing that we don't have to be perfect to be whole. When we integrate our shadow, we stop fighting against ourselves. We stop projecting our pain onto others, and in that space of acceptance and understanding, we find the freedom to be who we truly are. Shadow work is not only about understanding what resides within, it's about breaking cycles. The patterns of behavior, reactions, and emotions that seem to repeat endlessly in our lives are often fueled by parts of ourselves we don't fully understand. How many times have you found yourself in the same kind of argument, the same kind of toxic relationship, or the same self-defeating mindset, wondering why things never seem to change? This is not a coincidence. When we are unaware of our shadow, we are like puppets on strings, bound to act out the same unresolved conflicts over and over. These cycles persist because they are trying to show us something, to bring our attention to what we have ignored within ourselves. But instead of listening, we blame external circumstances or other people. We think, if only they would change, if only this situation were different, then I'd be happy, then I'd be at peace. Shadow work teaches us that the problem is rarely out there, it's within. And because it's within, we have the power to change it. When you start to break these cycles, it feels like stepping out of a fog. Suddenly, you can see that the things you used to blame others for were really reflections of your own unresolved emotions. For example, let's say you have a habit of attracting controlling or manipulative people into your life. At first, it's easy to see them as the problem, but shadow work asks you to look deeper. What is it about you that keeps drawing these people in? Are you afraid to set boundaries? Do you confuse control with love because of how you were raised? These are not easy questions to answer, but they are necessary. When you become aware of the patterns in your relationships and how they connect to your shadow, you gain the ability to choose differently. You can start to set boundaries, to prioritize respect over familiarity, to let go of people who don't value you. And as you do, you begin to see that breaking these cycles is not just about changing your relationships, it's about changing your relationship with yourself. The same is true for the way we handle emotions. Many of us have been taught to suppress certain feelings because they are seen as negative. Anger, sadness, fear, and guilt are often labeled as emotions to avoid, while happiness and positivity are celebrated. But emotions are not inherently good or bad, they are signals. They are the way your mind and body communicate with you, telling you what needs your attention. When you suppress these signals, you lose touch with yourself. You might think you're being strong by holding back your tears or swallowing your anger, but in reality, you're cutting yourself off from the truth of your experience. Shadow work teaches us to honor all of our emotions, even the difficult ones. It doesn't mean acting on them impulsively or letting them control us. It means listening to them, understanding where they come from, and allowing them to move through us without resistance. Anger, for example, is often a sign that a boundary has been crossed. Sadness can indicate a need for rest or reflection. Fear can point to areas where we feel vulnerable or uncertain. When we listen to these emotions instead of suppressing them, they lose their power to overwhelm us. They become allies, guiding us toward greater self-awareness and balance. But listening to your emotions is only part of the process. Shadow work also requires you to take responsibility for how your shadow influences your actions. It's not enough to understand why you feel the way you do. You have to look at how those feelings shape your behavior. For example, if you've suppressed your fear of rejection, you might find yourself avoiding intimacy or pushing people away before they have a chance to hurt you. If you've buried your anger, it might come out in passive-aggressive comments or sudden outbursts that catch even you off guard. These behaviors are not random, they are the shadow's way of protecting you from pain. But the protection comes at a cost. It keeps you stuck in patterns that prevent you from growing, from connecting, from living fully. Shadow work asks you to take an honest look at these patterns and decide whether they are serving you or holding you back. This is not about blaming yourself or feeling guilty for your mistakes. It's about recognizing that you have the power to change, to choose differently, to stop letting your shadow run the show. Taking responsibility for your shadow is one of the most empowering things you can do. It shifts the focus from what others are doing to what you can control. It reminds you that while you can't change the past, you can change how you respond to it. For example, if you grew up in an environment where love was conditional, you might have developed a habit of people-pleasing, constantly putting others' needs above your own in an attempt to earn their approval. Shadow work helps you see this pattern for what it is, a survival mechanism that no longer serves you. It gives you the tools to start setting boundaries, to prioritize your own well-being, and to recognize that you are worthy of love just as you are. This process is not easy. It requires patience, courage, and a willingness to sit with discomfort. But the rewards are profound. As you integrate your shadow, you begin to feel more whole, more authentic, more at peace. One of the most profound aspects of shadow work is how it changes your perspective on others. When you've faced your own shadow, you begin to see that everyone else has a shadow too. The people who hurt you, the ones who frustrate or disappoint you. They are not evil or malicious. They are acting out of their own pain, their own unresolved wounds. This doesn't mean you have to excuse their behavior or tolerate mistreatment, but it does mean that you can approach them with compassion rather than judgment. You can see that their actions are not about you, they are about them. This shift in perspective is liberating. It frees you from the need to take things personally, from the cycle of blame and resentment that keeps so many of us stuck. It allows you to focus on what you can control, your own healing, your own growth, and let go of what you can't. Compassion for others begins with compassion for yourself. Shadow work teaches us that the parts of ourselves we've judged and rejected are not flaws, they are wounds. And wounds need care, not criticism. When you start to show yourself the compassion you've been withholding, something remarkable happens. You begin to heal. You begin to see that you are not broken or unworthy. You are human, and being human means having a shadow. It means having fears, insecurities, and regrets. It means making mistakes and learning from them. When you accept this, when you stop fighting against yourself, you create space for something beautiful to emerge. Self-love. This is not the superficial self-love of affirmations and spa days. It's the deep, unshakable love that comes from knowing and accepting yourself fully, shadow and all. This kind of self-love is transformative. It changes the way you show up in the world. When you accept yourself, you stop looking for others to fill the gaps in your self-worth. You stop seeking validation or approval from people who can't give it to you. You stop trying to prove your value through achievements or external success. Instead, you start living from a place of authenticity. You start making choices that align with your values and your truth, rather than what others expect of you. And as you do, you begin to attract people and opportunities that resonate with who you truly are. This is the power of shadow work. It doesn't just change the way you see yourself, it changes the way you experience the world.